Most of the time when you go on vacation, you're going to stay in a place for a few days, like we did in Copenhagen and Aarhus. But there's an occasional time when you're going to visit a city maybe for just a few hours. And that's what happened the last time we went to Denmark. We visited my girlfriend's college friend who lives in Odense. Odense is a very lovely and charming city that is quite old. But it is also a forward-looking city. As you can tell, they planted grass over their streetcar tracks. And because my girlfriend told her friend that I had a certain fascination with an attraction in that city, we went there first. All right, so I've made it to Odense, and behind me is this submerged bust of Hans Christian Andersen. That's right, Hans. So probably the first question you have is, how did Hans become submerged? When the town of Odense canceled a project, the sculptor took offense and took his statue and submerged it in their harbor. A not so subtle way of saying, you ought to keep your word. Hans Christian Andersen is all over Odense because he was born in Odense. And that is why... This is Hans's town. It's like Frank Sinatra saying New York, New York. Hans, if he was a singer, would have sung Odense, Odense. But here we are. Now, we're visiting guests, so it's kind of a whirlwind tour of the town of Odense. So we're not really going to see so many things in depth, but we're going to see them very quickly. And then we'll make a few comments. You'll see my face in a few things. Like St. Canute's Cathedral, or church, named after King Canute IV, who was murdered by angry peasants in 1086. The bones of King Canute are in the church. See, there are the bones. I was under the impression that King Canute was actually killed in this church. And I took a picture of me at the place I thought he was killed. And why am I looking so happy at the place I thought a man was killed? Well, comedy is tragedy plus time. And if nearly 1,000 years goes by, I guess I can laugh at it. And don't feel so bad for King Canute. He was made a saint 14 years after his death. Now that really is comedy. And as we were whisked around Odense, we got to see the town hall, modeled after the Palazzo Pubblico in Siena, which it closely resembles. Here is the Palazzo Pubblico, so I guess it does resemble it. Who knew? And we drove past Odense's enormous hospital and healthcare facility. We didn't really look around the hospital. We just drove past it. I don't even think we intended to drive past it, but it happened to be on the way to her house. And then she told us the story about how Odense wanted to build a first-class, world-renowned hospital. So the committee took all these trips to these first-class, world-renowned hospitals all over the world. However, these trips cost a little too much, and they didn't quite, therefore, have the budget to build the first-class, world-renowned hospital they wanted to. So, over the last couple decades, they've been adding piecemeal to it, so it is a sprawling, confusing labyrinth and maze, where you really almost need a map and a GPS system to get you to your doctor. And of course, we saw the birthplace of Hans Christian Andersen. Like I said, we start with Hans because that's why this city's on the map, at least for the rest of the world, is Hans. This is a treat. Not only that, but we got to see Hans, and it's, I dare say, almost enough, but not quite enough. And that's why the town of Odense built the Hans Christian Andersen Museum. I didn't go to the museum because I was on a whirlwind tour, led by my girlfriend's college friend, who we had to rush because she had lunch prepared for us at her home. It was a delicious Danish meal in a cozy Danish house that gave me a sense of what Danish life is. Well, except for my girlfriend's college friend's obsession with Star Wars. And ignoring the homages to Chewbacca, it gave me insight into Danish life. And that beats going to a museum or going to a typical attraction an American tourist would probably go to, like Tivoli. It was wonderful. It was an afternoon where I got to experience how wonderful it is in Denmark and how wonderful the people are. Thank you kindly.